It all started one cold winter morning. I never expected that a single moment, a single word could change everything. "I have kids with her," he said, his voice shaking slightly as though he was unsure of how to continue. At that exact moment, my world came crashing down. The man I had married, the man I trusted, had been hiding a secret so devastating that I couldn't even begin to comprehend it. He was a father. Not just to our child, but to another set of kids with someone else. For years, I had been living in a lie. The words echoed in my mind. "How could you hide this from me?" I had been blindsided, and the pain that followed was unbearable. How could the person I had loved with all my heart, the person I had trusted with my life, keep such a huge part of his world from me? He had his own children I didn't know about until it was too late. And what was worse, he had hidden them, kept them away from me, as though they were a mere inconvenience. I had to know everything. I needed to understand why. And as I listened to him stumble through an apology, his face filled with regret, I realized something. He wasn't just sorry, he was scared. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw a man who wasn't in control. For years, he had manipulated me, kept me in the dark, and now he was trying to play the victim. But no more. I would not be the victim here. The rage that began to build up inside me wasn't just because of his betrayal. It was because I had been deceived for so long. I had spent years with a man who wasn't honest, and I had invested my life into a relationship that had no foundation of trust. You see, I always thought I knew who he was. We were building a life together. We had dreams, plans, a future. But what he had done, what he had kept from me, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal so deep, so calculated that I couldn't let it slide. I had to make him face the consequences, and I knew just how to do it. I wasn't going to confront him head-on, no. I wasn't going to let him see me sweat. He had underestimated me, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much this hurt me. No, I had a plan. I had spent the last few months quietly, carefully gathering information, putting together a strategy that would turn the tables. I wasn't just going to forgive him and move on. That wasn't an option. As he sat there apologizing, trying to explain himself, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. I had the power now, the power to take control of my life back. And that's when I made up my mind. He was going to pay for what he had done. Not with my forgiveness, not with my understanding, but with the consequences of his actions. I knew what I had to do. The law was on my side. But what I hadn't expected was that this battle was going to get much bigger than I had imagined. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the kids, his kids, the ones he had kept hidden. And I wasn't going to let them grow up in a world where their father could get away with this. He had played his cards, now it was my turn. But as I sat there looking him in the eyes, I realized that this wasn't just about winning a fight. It was about protecting myself, protecting my future, and showing him that no matter how far he tried to hide the truth, I would always find it. I would always fight for what was right. And the more I thought about it, the more determined I became. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not this time. No more lies, no more hiding the truth. I was going to make sure that everyone knew exactly what kind of man he truly was. How did he think he could keep such a big part of his life hidden from me? How could he betray my trust like this? I had my plan, and it was already set into motion. There was no going back. The only question now was whether or not he realized just how much I was capable of. But soon enough, he would know. He would realize that underestimating me was his biggest mistake. When I look back at everything, it's clear to me now how he had been playing the game all along. Every move he made was calculated, designed to keep me where he wanted me, dependent, trusting, blind to the reality that he had so many secrets. For years, I had thought we were building something real, something strong. But now, it's painfully clear that the life I thought I was living was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated performance. He was the master of deception. In front of me, he was the loving husband, the devoted father, the man who was always there, always looking out for me. He knew exactly what to say to keep me close, to keep me believing in the picture-perfect life we had built together. But behind closed doors, he was a different person. A man with an entirely different life, one that I knew nothing about until it was far too late. It was his silence that did the most damage. When I first met him, he had never mentioned the kids. And over time, I began to think that perhaps he simply wasn't the type of man who would want children outside of our marriage. I didn't press the issue because I trusted him. I trusted that he was being open with me, that there were no skeletons in his closet, no other family waiting to emerge from the shadows. But that was just it. He had kept me in the dark, kept me from ever questioning his actions, his choices, until that moment when everything came crashing down. His betrayal didn't just hurt because of the affair or the secret kids. It hurt because of how he had lied. He wasn't just hiding a family, he was hiding a part of himself, a side of him that I never knew existed. And that's when the anger began to take root. What really infuriated me was how easily he had manipulated me. When we first got married, he was charming, kind, everything I thought I wanted in a partner. But beneath that surface was a man who saw me as just another part of his life to control, another piece to fit into his perfectly constructed image. He kept me so comfortable, so secure, that I never questioned him. And every time I got too close to discovering the truth, he would pull away just enough, making me doubt myself, making me feel like I was the one imagining things. He was the master of gaslighting, and I had been his victim. His actions were those of a man who thought he could play with people's lives and get away with it. It wasn't just about keeping secrets. It was about exercising power over me, making sure I would never have the chance to see the full picture. He knew how to manipulate the truth, how to twist the facts, and how to make me question everything I believed in. He had gotten so comfortable in his lies that he never even considered the possibility that one day, someone would come along and expose him for who he really was. And that's where I came in. I wasn't going to stand by and let this happen. I wasn't going to let him have his way anymore. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about making sure he never hurt anyone like this again. He had crossed a line, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. But before I could confront him, before I could even begin to make my move, I had to get my hands on everything I could. I needed evidence. I needed to know the full extent of his betrayal. I started digging into his life, pulling apart the pieces of the story that didn't make sense. And what I found shocked me even more than I could have imagined. I discovered more about the other woman, his other family, and the lies he had told to keep it all hidden. I found text messages, emails, and bank statements that painted a picture of a man who had been living two completely different lives. There were meetings in secret places, trips he had taken that I never knew about, and the way he had kept everything so meticulously hidden, as though he was planning for this moment all along. Every time he came back from one of those trips, he had this look in his eyes, like he was keeping a secret that I was never supposed to uncover. And it was clear to me now that he had been living in a world of lies, a world where he believed he could have everything without facing the consequences. It was sickening to think about. He had been playing me for so long, and it was only now, when everything was out in the open, that I could see the true extent of his manipulation. It wasn't just that he had lied to me about the kids, it was the way he had lied about everything. The way he had controlled our relationship, making sure that I was always in the dark, always just a step behind. He had built this fortress of lies around himself, and I had been living inside it, thinking I was safe, thinking I was loved. But now I knew better. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. He had underestimated me. He thought he could pull the wool over my eyes and get away with it. But what he didn't realize was that I had spent months preparing for this moment, and I was ready to take him down. He had made the mistake of thinking he could control me, and now it was time for me to show him just how wrong he was. I had already set my plan into motion, and I wasn't going to stop until I had what I needed. He had betrayed me, but now it was time for me to take control of the situation. I wasn't going to let him walk away from this unscathed. No, this time it was going to be his turn to face the consequences. If that revenge hit just right, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more epic comebacks and justice-served stories. Drop a comment below, I'd love to know what you would have done in their place. As I sat there holding the evidence in my hands, I couldn't help but feel a rush of power. He had thought he was untouchable. He had thought he could keep his secret life hidden forever. But now I had the truth. I had everything I needed to destroy him. In those first few days after I discovered the truth, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, overwhelmed with emotions, yet all I could focus on was the one thing that mattered: getting my revenge. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about proving to myself, and to him, that he couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. He had hidden so many things from me for so long, but the thing about secrets is that they never stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, they come to light, and when they do, they burn everything in their path. But I wasn't going to expose him yet. No, I had learned enough over the years to understand that rushing in with emotions high would only cause chaos. I had to be smart about this. I had to think ahead, Think about everything I could do to make sure that he couldn't talk his way out of this. That's when I realized that the best way to take him down wasn't through a screaming match or a public confrontation, it was through strategy, through planning. I would dismantle his world piece by piece, and I would do it in a way that he would never see coming. I spent the next few weeks gathering information, carefully analyzing everything I had discovered. I took the text messages, the emails, the records, and I began building a case. I started to look for patterns, looking for moments when he had lied to me, when he had lied to the people around him. There was a part of me that was still in disbelief. How could someone so close to me, someone I had trusted with my life, do this to me? But the reality was undeniable. He had built his empire of lies, and now it was time for me to tear it down. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed help, someone who knew the legal system, someone who could help me navigate the maze of laws and loopholes. So I hired the best lawyer I could find. Someone with experience, someone who wasn't afraid to take on the powerful, someone who would fight for me. When I met with her for the first time, I laid out everything, every detail, every piece of evidence, every lie he had told. And when I was done, she looked at me, a quiet smile on her face, and said, "We're going to take him down." It was strange how calm I felt in that moment. I had been living in a whirlwind of anger and confusion, but now, as the plan began to take shape, I felt a sense of control. This was happening, I was finally doing something about it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in charge of my own life. I didn't just want to expose him. I wanted to make sure he couldn't escape the consequences of his actions. I wanted to make sure that this time, when he faced the truth, there would be no way for him to wiggle out of it, no way for him to hide behind more lies. He had taken something from me that could never be replaced, my trust, and now I was going to take everything from him. The plan I had in mind wasn't just about the kids or about the affair, it was about everything he had built. His reputation, his career, the image he had crafted for himself. I was going to tear it all apart. One by one I would expose the lies, each one more damaging than the last. But I had to be patient. I couldn't rush it. I had always been the one who kept things together, who made sure everything was in order. But now, everything was different. Now, I was the one who was going to be in control. And when I thought about how much he had taken from me, how much he had stolen from my life, it was clear that I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to forgive him, and I wasn't going to back down. The stakes had been raised, and I was ready to play. There was one thing I knew for sure: he had no idea what was coming. He thought he could keep his secrets buried forever, but he didn't understand that the truth always finds its way to the surface. And when it did, it would be too late for him to fix it. With the lawyer's help, I started to build the case against him. We gathered more evidence, making sure every angle was covered. The other woman had been careful too, but I knew she couldn't stay silent forever. I reached out to her, and after a few tense conversations, she agreed to testify. She wasn't doing it for me, she was doing it for herself. She had been lied to just like I had. She had been kept in the dark just like I had. And now she was ready to tell the world what had really been happening. As the pieces fell into place, I felt a sense of satisfaction, a quiet confidence. This wasn't just about exposing him, it was about justice. It was about making sure that no one else ever had to go through what I had gone through. This was bigger than just me. It was about ensuring that no one could ever manipulate, lie, or deceive the way he had. The world was going to know the truth, and there would be no turning back. For years, he had used his company as a shield, as a way to protect himself from the consequences of his actions. He had built a network of loyal followers, people who trusted him, people who believed in his carefully crafted image. But what they didn't know was that their leader, the man they admired, was living a double life. And when I exposed the truth about him, it was going to tear his empire apart. It wasn't just about destroying him, it was about making sure that everyone knew the truth. It was about showing the world who he really was, and in doing so, taking away everything he had worked so hard to build. I wanted him to feel the full weight of his betrayal. I wanted him to see how far his lies had reached, how much they had cost, and how much he was about to lose. I was ready. I had everything I needed. All the evidence, all the pieces were in place. Now it was time to strike. And when I did, there would be no escape. The truth was coming, and there was no way he could stop it. The moment had arrived, and with it came a rush of emotions I couldn't quite name: rage, satisfaction, and an unsettling calmness. Everything I had been working for, all the planning, the waiting, the quiet build-up of tension, it was about to come to fruition. I had spent months preparing for this, but nothing could truly prepare me for the look on his face when he finally realized the extent of my plan. The night before the big day, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing, turning over every detail, making sure everything was in place. But as the sun began to rise, something inside me shifted. The anger that had driven me all this time was no longer at the forefront. It was replaced by a quiet confidence. I was no longer the woman he had manipulated, the woman he had thought he could control. No, I was the one in control now, and that was a power I didn't intend to give up. The first blow came swiftly. I had arranged for an anonymous tip to be sent to his company, one that would lead to a full investigation into his actions. I knew he thought his secrets were safe there. He had always prided himself on being untouchable, but the truth was like a shadow, waiting to catch up with him. The tip was just the beginning, but it would be the catalyst that would set everything in motion. He didn't know it yet, but the walls were already closing in around him. The phone call came mid-morning, just as he was preparing for a meeting. I could almost hear the sharp intake of breath when he read the email, the one with the subject line "Urgent Investigation." His hands were shaking as he called his assistant to ask what was going on. He had no idea who had set this chain of events into motion, but I knew it wouldn't take long for him to put the pieces together. As the day wore on, the calls began coming in fast. First, his company's legal team, then the press, then his investors. Everyone he had worked so hard to impress, to manipulate, was suddenly questioning him, asking about the truth behind the allegations. It wasn't long before the rumors started to swirl, the whispers growing louder with each passing hour. He was losing control, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything would come crashing down. But I wasn't done yet. No, I had one more move to make, one more final act that would ensure he couldn't talk his way out of this. And for that, I needed to bring in someone from his past, someone who knew him better than anyone else. His ex-wife. She had always been a shadow in the background, a figure he had carefully erased from his life. But I knew she had information, secrets that would be the final blow to his carefully constructed world. I reached out to her, and after a few tense phone calls, we agreed to meet. She was hesitant at first, understandably so. She had been burned by him just like I had. But in the end, she agreed to help. Together, we would expose him for who he really was. I arranged for the meeting to take place at a quiet cafe in the city, a place where we could talk without interruption. When she walked in, I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the same wariness I had felt when I first started to put everything together. But there was something else there too, something stronger than fear. There was a sense of justice in her eyes, the same feeling I had when I first realized I was going to take him down. We didn't waste time on pleasantries. I got straight to the point. I needed her help to bring him down, to expose everything he had done. And when she heard what I had uncovered, she didn't hesitate. She knew the man I was describing all too well. The lies, the manipulation, the way he had twisted the truth to serve his own needs. It was all too familiar to her. Together, we put together the final pieces of the puzzle, everything we needed to bring him down for good. The information she provided was the final nail in his coffin. She knew the darkest parts of his past, things he had tried so hard to bury, things that would destroy him if they were ever revealed. When the time came, I made sure it was perfect. We sent a final email to his company, one that included all the evidence, everything we had gathered, every lie, every betrayal. I watched as the hours ticked by, waiting for the reaction I knew was coming. And when it finally arrived, I felt a rush of satisfaction flood through me. The company issued a statement, announcing that they were severing ties with him immediately. They would no longer associate with someone who had lied so extensively and compromised the integrity of their business. The press picked up on it almost instantly. His name, once synonymous with success, now became a punchline. His lies were exposed for the world to see, and there was no turning back. The investors pulled their funding, the public turned their backs on him, and his reputation crumbled faster than I could have imagined. But it didn't end there. His personal life was next. The truth about the other family, the kids he had hidden from me, was now public knowledge. The woman he had kept secret, the one he had tried to bury along with his lies, was now speaking out. The ex-wife joined in, sharing her story about the years of manipulation and deceit, about the ways he had twisted the truth to control her and keep her in the dark. I watched from a distance as everything he had worked for slipped through his fingers. There was no mercy, no way out. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about making sure he faced the consequences of his actions. And with each passing day, I could feel the weight of my own pain lifting, replaced by something stronger, the knowledge that I had fought back. I had won. I had prepared myself for this moment. But no matter how much I had planned, nothing could quite match the feeling of seeing the pieces fall into place one after another. The satisfaction that came from watching him unravel in the wake of my carefully executed plan was almost indescribable. Still, it wasn't over yet. The true test wasn't just seeing his reputation crumble. It was making sure that justice was served, not just for me, but for the kids he had tried to hide, and for the years of deceit he had subjected us all to. The legal system was the final battleground. When I first hired the lawyer, I was hesitant, uncertain about the path ahead. But as the days passed and I saw the weight of evidence we had amassed, I grew more confident. We had built a case that was ironclad. His lies were exposed in every possible way, and now it was time to use the law to make sure he would never regain control over his life the way he had before. I wasn't just fighting for my own vindication. I was fighting for the kids he had manipulated, and I was fighting to make sure that the abuse of trust he had carried out for so long wouldn't go unpunished. The court proceedings were as intense as they were draining. Every day felt like an emotional battle. I had to relive the pain, the lies, the betrayal, everything I had been through with him. But each time I stepped into that courtroom, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wasn't just telling my story, I was showing everyone exactly who he was. I was exposing him for the manipulator he had been, the man who thought he could lie his way out of every situation. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my chest, each time a piece of evidence came forward, each time I saw the jury's reaction to the truth. I had seen the way he had tried to spin the story, the way he had attempted to shift the blame, making it seem as though he was the victim in all of this. It was infuriating to watch, knowing how much he had stolen from me, how much he had stolen from those innocent children, how much he had twisted the narrative to serve his own selfish purposes. But despite his attempts to weasel out of the situation, the truth had already won. The turning point in the case came when we were able to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he had been living a double life. The other woman's testimony, combined with the undeniable evidence of his financial dealings and hidden assets, left him with no way to deny what he had done. There was no more room for his excuses, no more room for him to hide. Everything he had worked so hard to protect was now being used against him in the court of law. As his lawyers scrambled to mount a defense, we were already one step ahead. We had already anticipated his every move, already accounted for every potential loophole. The case against him was airtight. And it was then that I realized just how much power I had in this moment, not because I had been wronged, not because I wanted revenge, but because I had the truth on my side. The law was there to protect me, to protect the innocent, and I wasn't about to let him manipulate it the way he had manipulated everything else in his life. With each day of the trial, I could see him growing more desperate. His calm demeanor, which had once been his shield, was cracking. He no longer carried the air of invincibility that had once defined him. He was a man cornered, his lies unraveling in front of a room full of strangers, people who were now seeing the truth for the first time. It was almost poetic how quickly he had fallen from the pedestal he had carefully built for himself. He had been untouchable, but no one stays untouchable forever. When the final verdict came in, it was nothing short of a triumph. The judge ruled in my favor, and not only that, but he also awarded me full custody of the children, the ones he had hidden from me, the ones he had tried to keep out of my life. I remember sitting there in the courtroom hearing those words, and it was as though the world had shifted. It wasn't just a win, it was the kind of win that changes everything. It was justice, pure and simple. His reaction was exactly what I expected. He was stunned, unable to comprehend the loss of everything he had worked so hard to protect. But there was no turning back now. The judge had spoken and the law had decided. For once, the scales of justice were balanced. As the courtroom emptied, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of closure. It wasn't just about him losing, it was about me gaining something I had lost years ago, the ability to stand on my own, to take back control of my life, to prove that I was strong enough to fight back. The emotional toll had been heavy, but the victory felt sweeter because of it. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when the truth seems impossible to uncover, there is always a way to make things right. And as for him, well, he walked out of that courtroom a broken man. The life he had so carefully constructed had come crashing down around him, and there was no way to rebuild it. No amount of lies or manipulation could save him now. His world was shattered, and I had no sympathy for the man who had caused me so much pain. He had brought this upon himself. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was as though I could finally breathe again. The legal battle was over, but the emotional healing was just beginning. It wouldn't happen overnight, but now I had a future to look forward to. The past had been dealt with, and for the first time in a long time I felt free. There was one thing I knew for sure: no one, not even him, could take this away from me. The truth had won, and I had won. As the days passed, everything he had built, his empire, his reputation, his entire identity, crumbled before his eyes. The fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. First, it was his career. Investors pulled out, colleagues turned their backs, and his company announced bankruptcy, unable to recover from the scandal that had engulfed him. He had once been a figure of power, but now he was a cautionary tale, a man whose lies had destroyed him. Then came the blow to his personal life. The children, whom he had kept hidden for so long, were now in my care. He had lost any claim to them, and his role as their father was forever tainted. The ex-wife, once a quiet figure in the background, now became a voice in the media, sharing her story of betrayal and manipulation. But the most crushing blow of all was his own mental state. The man who had once been so confident, so certain of his control, was now a shell of himself, consumed by regret and guilt. I could almost hear his internal monologue. Was it worth it? The answer, though, was already clear. His lies had cost him everything. His pride, his dignity, his family, they were all gone. And as he sank deeper into his own self-inflicted misery, I knew that, in the end, there was no one to blame but himself. As I stood on the other side of this battle, I realized that victory wasn't just about what I had gained, but about the lessons it taught me. I had spent so long consumed by anger and pain, driven by the desire for revenge. But in the end, it wasn't about him losing. It was about me rediscovering who I was and what I was capable of. I had been broken, deceived, but now I was stronger than ever. The scars would remain, but they were no longer a symbol of my defeat. They were reminders of how far I had come, how resilient I had become. I realized that I didn't need anyone to validate my worth. I could stand on my own, and that was more powerful than anything he could have taken from me. And as I began to rebuild my life, I found myself reaching out to help others who had gone through similar betrayals, offering them a sense of hope, showing them that they could rise above their circumstances, just as I had. In helping others, I found a deeper sense of purpose. In the end, I had learned that while revenge might feel sweet, it's the strength to rise above the pain that truly defines us. And that's the lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life.